All right, today I'm here with Adam Moore, and we are going to talk a little bit about coming out at work. What are the most common emotional barriers you see people face when they're coming out later in life?
Well, first of all, let me just come out here, just in case y'all don't know. I am indeed a homosexual. Surprise. I think one thing to keep in mind is that for some people, coming out is something that might be a decision that they get to make. Some people, like me, you can kind of see me coming a mile away. And so it is oftentimes a privilege for some people to be able to stay in the closet to feel safe. Coming out later in life has a lot of nuance and challenges to it. One of the things I often see in folks who are later in life trying to come out is like one grieving what was going on in their world that they could not connect with this part of themselves. And maybe they tried and the environments they were in were not allowing it, not giving. Maybe they weren't taught that these things could be a part of them. And so they always realized something was different from the environment they were in, but they didn't have a way to talk about it. And so later in life, when there's maybe more resources, less pressure, things like that, it's easier to connect to those things. And then also, I just think about trauma. So often, young people in a system, in a family system, don't have power. And if some part of you is different than what is expected, and the system does not make it okay for you to exist, if they're not explicitly celebrating the diversity of the human like spirit, then it can be a message that like a young person internalizes that it's not okay for me to be this. And you take all of that and then you look at like the United States and the ways that queer people are marginalized. It can be really challenging to finally connect to those parts of yourself. Typically, when people are in that phase, right, when they find me for therapy and they're like, I don't know what's up, but I know like I can't continue to live without this part of my identity being online. And I don't know what that means to me. I don't know what it looks like to explore. A lot of my job is just going to be a witness. So in therapeutic spaces, we're going to do one of the most basic things of therapy, which is person-centered therapy. Essentially say like, what if whoever you were was great and celebrated? Who would you be? What would that look like? And my job's going to be to reflect to them and with kindness and curiosity what they're bringing up, helping them see that outside of shoulds and shame, there could be a self that could be really loved and celebrated. Coming out later in life, what makes that harder for a lot of people is a lot of times they're established. So, it's not uncommon in my line of work to have a couple come in and one person might realize that their sexuality is more expansive or their gender is more expansive. And now what do we do? Because we have, a kid, a mortgage, like it can really dysregulate an individual or the whole system. And kind of depending on how much safety, how much care there is already in that system, that will usually like guide how we go about the process. But oftentimes it is just making it okay for them to be seen and celebrated and exist. And if you're the therapist in that space, something that I think is important to note is as much as I love coming out and supporting people in that process, that is not the goal. Honestly, I really wish we lived in a world where people didn't have to come out. Like I have been this way since the jump. I was I was like in elementary school making fake mimosas at home with like 7 Up and orange juice. Like We've knew who she was for a long time. And rather than me having to come out in that experience, I wish the community I in would had seen me and say, "Oh, we see how special you are, and we want to celebrate that." I knew someone growing up whose mom, he was like 5, pulled him to the side, and she said, "Baby, you gonna be gay," and that is great. Like she just like laid it out for him that this is who you are. And that man was very gay and very fabulous and lovely. And it made me so happy to, at such an early age, he had that level of support. So for a lot of people who are coming out later in life, they often too have learned to navigate the world in certain ways to be safe that may not be helpful and or as helpful in adulthood. So as a young queer little person, I couldn't be radically authentic. So I learned to lie to be safe. And then as I came into my own sense of self, one of the things I had to do was go, oh, this was a tool that was really helpful before this point, but now it actually becomes a problem because people don't want to be close to me if I can't be honest with them. And so I had to learn to like value that attribute kept me safe for a long time when I needed it. And then I had to recognize that I'm no longer a child, I'm an adult, so I have more resources, support, I have more agency. And so I had to go, what tools are going to be a better fit? So a lot of times it's helping people just unpack that. And that could look like all sorts of stuff.
I've seen it with clients, and even actually I had a friend that's in their 40s that just came out. And as they talked about it, they were like, this is the step that I'm taking now. And talking about it in that experience with them, it was like they knew that there was a sign for them that they were ready for that.
Hmm.
And paying attention to that as they continue forward and figuring out what it then means later on down the road. They don't have to know it all now because they don't.
Hmm.
And that's okay too. But I
Yeah.
guess that ties to like another question that I have for you though, Adam, of what are the internal signs that tell somebody that they may be ready to come out, even if they're scared?
Yeah. A lot of that I think of our nervous system. Right? Our nervous system can be very alert and aware, and to feel oftentimes chronically activated, right? If I'm actively hiding a part of myself from my daily lived experience, anytime someone comes around that, anytime I feel like someone might be clocking that part of me, my nervous system's probably going to alert me. And there can be a point where it's just exhausting, right? If you're chronically activated, ready for danger, when do you get to rest? When do you get to just like be focused on something other than survival? When do you get to focus on thriving? And I think oftentimes what I see for people coming out and later in life is they've done all the adult things, right? They got their career. They probably in this world we live in are renting a place, not owning a place, but they have achieved all the things they've been told to achieve to feel joy. And they look around and they go, but where's the joy? Like, I don't feel the goodness I'm supposed to be feeling. And some of that comes from, too, if I allow kind of like a diplomat of me who's not radically authentic, but the parts that are maybe more palatable to the people I'm around to come out, any praise that version of me gets doesn't really hit for me. It is for this person I'm pretending to be. And so that can lead to people really feeling lonely and isolated, really feeling miserable, even with a tremendous amount of success, because the success isn't really for who you are, it's for who you're pretending to be. And oftentimes is a way that people go, oh, this might be time. Another way, a kind of funner, sexier way, is they meet someone and they're like, okay, I had this experience, right? Like maybe I allowed myself to leave my everyday and go into a romantic or erotic connection with someone. Maybe I've been friends with someone for a long time and the emotions have been growing. And all of a sudden I'm like, oh, wow, this is what I feel for this person feels deeper than friendship love. And so sometimes those experiences help someone go, oh, I can't fragment this part of me anymore. It is now too big. It is this it's almost like it's too grand inside of me to tuck away. I can't hide it the same way. It's exhausting to do.
I can also imagine that that may feel scary when that part of themselves exciting and scary when that part of themselves builds momentum and it's like, but I've controlled this thing for so long or pushed this back. And that
Yeah.
tug of war is something that can feel like a risk for people and or what is like a good reason to come into therapy too, to try and
Yeah.
get support around that, to figure out like what feels right for them and then negotiating it on their terms.
And I think even just beyond that, this has been their identity for so long. And so who am I if I'm not having to manage all this? If I'm not constantly in survival mode and trying to make sure people don't read me? And it is a really challenging process for people because oftentimes there's grief of like what you experience, what you maybe didn't pursue because you weren't in an environment that taught you radical self-love. There can be a lot of confusion because you can be excelling at things as an adult, but not have some of the skills that are developmental steps that you didn't get to like experience. So like, for example, I didn't get to go to like prom with a guy. And so yeah, you find a lot of people like in their 20s and 30s who are first stepping into a part of their sexuality that could feel more authentic to them, then they're learning, oh, I don't know how to manage these emotions I have. I've never been on a date. Who pays? How do if there isn't this script that is given to you like we typically do for heteronormative cis relationships, in queerness, there isn't this script. You got to make your own. And if you don't know how to do that, ooh, it can feel really scary and overwhelming and make you feel really insecure. So a lot of that work in therapy is just making that okay for people. Like, yeah, sometimes people have sexual behaviors that don't align with their sexual identity. So, like, oh, okay, I'm in a male identified body. I might enjoy giving oral sex to another person with the penis, but I don't identify as gay or bi. And, there's a lot that can come with identity that someone may not vibe with. They may not feel safe connecting with those elements. At the same time, they might feel that sense of deep connection with the person. And, if emotions start to like grow, if there's emotional vulnerability and bonding, it is another reason that people might come to therapy. They're like, whoa, I was just kind of doing this because it was a release and fun. And though I wouldn't say I'm gay, I may be gay for this experience. And that's totally valid, right? I think sometimes when we think about sexual identity in particular, it's like, okay, you're gay, so here's your Eliza Minnelli record. You put on like the ruby slippers. Again, nothing wrong with stereotypically gay things, because obviously the challenge is when people feel like they can't be authentic to themselves to explore those worlds. And so it really is in therapy going, oftentimes when someone's exploring their sexual identity, I'm like, hey, give yourself like 6 months or a year just to go do all the things, right? Go to the opera, go wear Speedo at Hippie Hollow, like go do all the gay things and look at it as gathering data to understand yourself. Because that person has probably spent a tremendous amount of time thinking about people, places, and things outside of themselves as a way to navigate the world. Where this is going to bring it back inside of them to be curious about, like, okay, again, what if anything I did was celebrated and loved? What would I do?
Yeah. I
And
think
then,
that's a good way of honoring their experience as opposed to like the opposite, which I feel like Heated Rivalry does a good job of kind of showing some of the challenges of those different dynamics of the desire versus kind of having those different pieces that are squashed down and how we present ourselves professionally and personally and the contrast between that, which I guess it's like that ties into my next question, which is what workplace factors make it safer or riskier for someone to come out professionally? And how can someone assess their company culture to see if it's genuinely supportive versus superficially inclusive?
yeah. So, William, off the bat, I am want to not trust capitalism. So, a company could be like, "We love you," and I'm like, "Great," but if I drop dead, you would replace me on Friday. So, like, there is a degree of understanding that your identity is often not going to be as meaningful to them. Right. I think of capitalism like this. They see people as resources. So to them, I'm just a stapler. So that is how I enter the chat. So now if I'm looking at maybe coming out at work and having that feel more inclusive, things I want to be aware of is like, one, where do I work? So what state do I work in? What are the laws around that? Because it's different for different states. And so, that will help kind of any anxiety that's coming up, help you go, okay, what can I do to be ready and understand what are my rights as like a person? I'm curious, right? Like in a system like that, depending how big the system is, they may have like an LGBT like group of folks who already celebrate things and like during Pride Month they might be like doing like fun games and things like that. Is that really full of queer people or is it feel full of allies? And if it's a lot more ally vibe, that would have me be like, ooh, that maybe is not for me. Oftentimes, when it comes to our identities, people who are not in the queer community can have an idea of what it means to know us and support us, right? If you look at me on the surface, it's me and my husband, and that seems so cute. We've been together. In March, it's going to be 17 years we've been together. Wild. And, right, like I'm a two-person job at minimum. So I have frisky friends and like partners. And sometimes that added knowledge of who I am and my identity is too much for people who think, oh, I'm here and supportive. I see you and your little gay husband. You're good. And some people would say, well, Adam, you don't talk about the sex you have at work. Like that's inappropriate. No one ever would. But if you asked me what I did on the weekend and I went to a movie with my husband and my boyfriend, what do you want me to do? Lie to you? Like it comes down to like there's more to the queer experience than just the sex that we have. And sometimes that is going to be challenging for people, even people who think they are supportive.
Yeah.
So
So there's like the
it's
shades of transparency that you feel allowed to have and that people feel allowed to have just because I guess they're the culturally normative pieces that people may be more ready for or may be more challenged with depending on who they are
yeah,
and their background and their experience. And that
and I
makes it
get it.
much harder.
Yeah, like when we were going to the Supreme Court for marriage equality, we chose Edie Windsor as like the representative, like a grandmother type figure. They didn't have me out there. And then he'd laugh me right out. I'd be like, no, nothing for this notorious FAG. Like, no. But for like a grandmother type figure, how could you deny her? So I get that like it could feel really foreign to some people. For people who are like new in exploring, sometimes in figuring that out for themselves, it is its own process. So, okay, I finally identified this and this is who I am, and now I want the world to see it. And so you like go the next day and they want to have like rainbows all over their stuff. And they may realize in that process, like, oh, cool, I'm okay being seen. What that means to me, what degree that I do that, that could change as I get to know, like, how do I have my own sexual identity and live in it and let people connect with it. And really, what it comes down to is I'm much more about like who in the system like do I feel that sense of connection with. And if I'm new in my identity and I feel like I have a colleague who very much understands me, if it feels safe, then we can have that conversation. Hey, I really like our vibe. I do have some to talk about that's outside of the work that we do. If you're open to having some friendship talk. And so setting it up like that can really allow them to opt in and help them be a support to you in a way that would feel meaningful. Hmm.
What strategies do you recommend for clients who want to come out at work, but also want to maintain a professional authority or leadership presence?
Yeah. So, marginalized people, we all know that we have to work twice as hard to be respected. And the more marginalized identities you hold, the more you're going to have to work. Right? So women know that they are probably gonna have to work more than their male counterparts to be getting the same respect. Same thing with queer people, same thing with people of color. Like there's a lot of extra work you have to do. So sometimes when people are like new to an identity that's marginalized, and let's say all their other identities have privilege, it can be really jarring to think, why are people pushing back on me more? Why didn't they just take me at face value? Why am I less heard in meetings? And sometimes that's going to be because of an identity. I market myself as the straight friendly therapist. And sometimes cis straight men do end up in my office. And, I think for them, they're so used to the world being about them, supporting them, to be in the presence of something that does not work that way. Sometimes they question, like, well, are you really going to be helpful? Do you know how to work with straight people, essentially? And, they don't realize that that's all they taught me in grad school. So I was like, honey, you're going to get more than that. You're going to get 7 semesters of that and this 44 lived experience of fabulousness. So, if anything, my queer identity makes me even better to do this labor for you because I'm going to help you understand parts of your relationship, parts of yourself that you have never been able to look at. So I think of it as like, how do you see what you bring as a strength? And oftentimes, people who are marginalized are made to act in ways that people with privilege elevate in a workplace, right? We call it being professional, but really it's like, oh, how do we make it comfortable for the people with privilege? And so as you like learn how to do that with your queer identity, there can be even more power. So it's like, cool, I might be able to talk to clients who are also queer, and they're gonna feel more comfortable with me doing whatever work I'm doing because they feel seen even without me saying anything. So seeing it as like, can you see it as a superpower? Can you see the strength in it?
It's good. And Adam, I wanted to go to another question that you had actually brought up when we were offline, which was how do people's experiences of being closeted impact the way that they function in adulthood? I think that's such a great question. And I want to make sure that we cover that for people.
Yeah. I think a lot of times, especially as we're coming out, there's the joy of finally being able to be ourselves. And that is something to be celebrated and something to have space just to be in and vibe in. Right behind that is going to come recognizing what did I have to give up to get here,
Yeah.
right? Sometimes people might really internalize sexism, right? Anything feminine within me would get me in trouble. So I learned to fragment and hate those parts of me. So then when I could finally come out, I was like, oh, I'm finally be gay, but like women, who needs them? Well, guess what I do? I love my sapphics. I love women. But when I first came out, when I was 21, that was a little bit of a process because I had to hate the femininity within me to be safe, which meant I was not honoring the femininity in the world around me. And people can exist in that and bop along, but it's going to come at a cost. And there's a real power in slowing down and going like, what did I have to do to be safe? How did that impact my functioning? And now that I'm safe, what do I want it to be? So do I have to continue to be dishonest to be safe? I don't. I can be radically authentic now. So I can be grateful for that tool protecting me when I had less power and autonomy and resources. And at the same time say, oh, it's not a tool that I want to pick up anymore. I would rather be honest with the people who I care about, even though that behavior once was my saving grace. And then we see this too in like relationship work. Sometimes the relationships that we get into, they're going to be impacted by our experiences in the closet or coming out. So I've had people who have been pushed out of the closet because someone caught someone, there was a note exposed. Like there's a lot of ways that can happen. And sometimes those people might highly value privacy. So then you have a relationship and one person's like, no, I want intimacy and I want to know all about you. And someone's like, no, 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 privacy. Well, that's like some trauma residue. And if you're not aware of that, it's easy to fall into the trap of like, this is just how a relationship should be, right? You should just be open and honest. And there's not the honoring of like why someone might struggle with that. And so I think being curious about our early experiences, what we had to do to be safe, taking time to be grateful, taking time to put some of those tools down, and being curious about which ones are going to be more helpful now. That's the way I would work through it.
Thank you for sharing that. So, last question that I have for you is,
Mhm.
what are healthy ways to cope if coming out leads to unexpected rejection or subtle workplace bias? I feel like you've addressed this with different nuggets, but I'd love to hear
Mhm.
your complete answer to that question.
Yeah. So one, I think about someone's initial reaction may not be their lasting reaction. So if it took me a minute to come out and come to terms with this, cool, it may take a colleague, a person a minute to like get there too. And I'll just own that, right? I'll encourage clients to talk about that. Hey, I feel close to you. This is what's up. Here's what is going to be helpful to me. Take some space, think about it, and then get back to me. And with that, depending how much labor we want to put on the person who's coming out, because they're already going through a tremendous amount, I think it can be helpful to have a PDF of resources for people who maybe want to be supportive or are open to being supportive, but don't know where to start, which sucks because it puts the burden of educating on the person who's already marginalized. And it can make it easier because you're like, look, read this book, listen to the podcast, and then we can have a conversation. Because what I don't want to do is like teach you things that are like Googleable. And then, when it comes to work, I'm a big fan of documenting things. So if you come out and it seems like the office is getting shady, that's where I would start like a paper trail, making sure if there's meetings that are happening in person, that I would send the follow-up email with bullet points of like what I'm taking away from the meeting, asking for clarification. So I'm going to be covering my behind because again, it's capitalism and who knows, right? Someone could just not like that you are now living authentically. That could stir up stuff within them that's unprocessed, unexamined, and you take the lumps for them. So it's just a way to protect yourself.
I can understand that hypervigilance and carefulness
Mhm.
because certainly it comes from a lot of wisdom and experience of different people, which is
Yeah.
a
I
challenge.
thought you were gonna say that comes from me, and I was like, "Are you calling me old?"
No, not at all. I don't want to
I
make that
said,
mistake, Adam. I'm
I
smarter
said,
than that.
not a hate crime on this.
Oh, I'm older than you anyway, so why would I be doing that? If I were saying you were old, then I'm even older, and that's a
See,
terrible
Billy,
thing.
that don't mean anything because you in the straight club, baby. It's different for us. It's like dog years for us. In my community, I'm Methuselah.
Whatever, whatever.
Yeah.
So, Adam, if
In your
people
community,
wanted
I'm a child.
to find you or resources on your website, tell them how they can do that.
Yes, y'all, first of all, she's an Instagram doll, so you can find me at moontower_counseling. It's just me, so you get to see my beautiful face, my beautiful words, my beautiful wisdom. And then I'm on moontowercounseling.com. So I am here to help you through anything queer, really. My goodness, at this point, 13 years of doing this work. A lot of negotiate non-monogamy, helping people open up their relationships, a lot of stuff in kink, be that exploring kink for the first time, or if you're in the kink community and you got depression, girl, I got you. It's okay. So that's how you find me. And then the streets.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you for taking time to share with us
Yeah.
today.